To all those working, marching, and championing real climate action, I want you to know that you are on the right side of history and that I am with you. I won't give up this fight of our lives. Excellence.
Excellencies,
Nous devons
we must also be determined to honour the Charter's commitment to fundamental human rights. Just 4 women signed our founding document. One look around this room shows that not enough has changed. We the peoples does not mean we the men. Women are still waiting for equal opportunities and equal pay. Women are still waiting for equal opportunities and equal pay, for equality under the law, for their work to be valued and their opinions to count. Around the globe, women's rights, including sexual and reproductive rights, are being suppressed and even rolled back, and women's freedoms curtailed. In some countries, women and girls are punished for wearing too many clothes. In others, for wearing too few. Thanks to generations of women's rights activists, times are changing. From sports field to schools and public squares, girls and women are challenging the patriarchy and winning. I stand with them. I entered this office with a commitment to ensure gender parity at the UN. We have achieved that at senior levels and are on track to do so across the UN system. Because gender equality is not the problem. Gender equality is the solution. It is not a favour to women. It is a fundamental condition to ensuring a better future for all. Excellencies, we must be determined to answer the call to action to put human rights at the heart of our work. 75 years after the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, there has been enormous progress in some areas, from ending colonization and segregation to ensuring women's voting rights. But we have not achieved basic rights for all. When 1.2 billion people still live in acute poverty and hunger is at levels not seen since 2005. When discrimination on racial and ethnic grounds is perfectly legal in many countries. When people must risk death to seek a better life. When refugees, migrants, and minorities are routinely demonized and hounded. When declaring your gender identity or simply who you love can lead to imprisonment or even execution. When speaking out can lead to perilous consequences. Human rights, political, civil, economic, social, and cultural, are the key to solving many of the world's interlinked problems. Laws to protect the vulnerable must be enacted and enforced. The targeting of minorities must stop, and human rights and human dignity must be at the centre of social, economic, and migration policies. All governments must fulfil the commitment they made in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Excelências.
Excellencies, we must also face up to the looming threats posed to human rights by new technologies. Generative artificial intelligence holds much promise, but it may also lead us across a Rubicon and into more danger than we can control. When I mentioned artificial intelligence in my General Assembly speech in 2017, only 2 other leaders even uttered the term. Now AI is on everyone's lips, a subject of both awe and fear. Even some of those who developed generative AI are calling for greater regulation. But many of the dangers of digital technology are not looming, on the horizon, they are here. The digital divide is inflaming inequalities. Hate speech, disinformation, and conspiracy theories on social media platforms are spread and amplified by AI, undermining democracy and fueling violence and conflict in real life. Online surveillance and data harvesting are enabling human rights abuses on a mass scale. And technology companies and governments are far from finding solutions.
We must move fast and mend things. New technologies require new innovative forms of governance, with input from experts building this technology and from those monitoring its abuses. And we urgently need a global digital compact between governments, regional organizations, the private sector, and civil society to mitigate the risks of digital technologies and identify ways to harness their benefits for the good of humanity. Some have called for consideration of a new global entity on AI that could provide a source of information and expertise for member states. There are many different models, inspired by such examples as the International Atomic Energy Agency, the International Civil Aviation Organization, or the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And the UN stands ready to host the global and inclusive discussions that are needed, depending on the decisions of member states. To help advance the search for concrete governance solutions, I will appoint this month a high-level advisory body on artificial intelligence, which will provide recommendations by the end of this year. And next year's Summit of the Future is a once-in-a-generation opportunity for progress to deal with these new threats in line with the vision of the UN Charter. Member states will decide how to move forward on the new agenda for peace, the Global Digital Compact, reforms to the international financial architecture, and many other proposals to address challenges and bring greater justice and equity to global governance. Excellencies, the United Nations was created precisely for moments like these, moments of maximum danger and minimum agreement. We can and must use our tools in flexible and creative ways. Last month, we saw the dividends of determination off the coast of Yemen. Carrying 1 million barrels of oil, the decaying FSO Safar supertanker was a ticking time bomb, a looming ecological disaster in the Red Sea. But no one offered to solve the problem. So the United Nations stepped in and brought the world together. We mobilized resources, assembled the experts, navigated difficult negotiations, and built trust. We have more work ahead and more resources are needed. But last month, the oil was successfully transferred from the Safar. This UN-led action saved the Red Sea. When no one else could or would, UN determination got the job done. Despite our long list of global challenges, that same spirit of determination can guide us forward. Let us be determined to heal divisions and forge peace, determined to uphold the dignity and worth of every person, determined to realize the Sustainable Development Goals and effectively leave no one behind, determined to reform multilateralism for the 21st century and come together for the common good. And I thank you.
I thank the Secretary General. The Assembly will now turn to Agenda Item 8, entitled General Debate. Excellencies, heads of state and government, Mr. Secretary General of the United Nations, honorable ministers, distinguished delegates, and all stakeholders here present. Good morning. It is my honor and privilege as President of the United Nations General Assembly to welcome you to this hall for the opening of the general debate of the 78th session. Allow me to acknowledge in our midst today several presidents, former presidents of the General Assembly, including His Excellency Han Sang-soo, former Prime Minister of Korea, who served as President of the 56th session of the Assembly, and who now sits as Chair of the UN Council of Former Presidents of the General Assembly. Together, this Assembly Hall and this rostrum stand as a living testament to multilateralism and to the extraordinary role and compelling influence of the United Nations over the 75 years of its existence. It is a unique and truly global platform for debate, dialogue, and problem solving through multilateral diplomacy. This year, our imperative is clear: to unite the nations, to be united in conviction of common purpose and in solidarity of joint action. Excellencies, such a common coordinated approach is needed now as much as at any point in our history. War, climate change, debt, energy and food crises, poverty and famine. These crises are directly impacting the lives and well-being of billions of people around the world. They are rolling back decades of hard-won development gains and thus condemning millions to lifelong intergenerational poverty and hardship. It is at times like these that we must search deep within to find our better selves and our common humanity that impels us to meet the moment. I therefore implore you, let us use this forum for that which it was intended. Let us listen and learn. Let us rebuild trust and reignite global solidarity. And let us find common ground to address the challenges we face. In the words of the late, great Madeleine Albright, if the UN did not exist, we would have to invent it. We are fortunate, therefore, that it does indeed exist. Let us therefore make full and effective use of this unparalleled resource. Excellencies, this message is all the more important in light of the continued violation of the territorial integrity and sovereignty of a fellow member of the United Nations, Ukraine. That horrendous war has unleashed untold suffering and destroyed countless families, communities, and lives. Its cascading impacts has also spooked many developing countries in far-flung corners of the globe, unleashing acute shortages of essential commodities, triggering food insecurity and volatility in energy prices. It has even revived the unconscionable threat of nuclear war. We all want this war to end. It is an affront to everything that this organization and the UN Charter stands for. We need just and sustainable peace in Ukraine and elsewhere in the world, in line with international law and with the UN Charter. Peace must also be given a chance in other parts of the globe, from Africa to the Middle East. With the adoption of the Agenda 2063, Africa spelled a clear path for the Africa we want, and the continent still has a great chance to cut a corner in consolidating democracy and good governance. But the resurgence of coups in Africa is a regressive step, and the root causes of such alarming trends must be carefully analyzed and addressed. I urge you, member states, to use this high-level week not to fan the flames of conflict and hostility, but instead to opt for dialogue and diplomacy. We must remember that peace is an investment in our collective prosperity. I call on leaders to come together, to abide by the Charter, and support efforts to deliver a peaceful resolution to the war. Excellencies, yesterday we began our high-level week with the SDG Summit. It offered a prime moment to take stock of our successes and failures in delivering the Sustainable Development Goals. Front and center with the fact that 1.2 billion people are living in multidimensional poverty as of 2022. While some progress has been made on the goals, the summit is being convened in a context where there have been unacceptable delays and rollbacks. Let me be clear, we do not have the luxury of excuses, nor are we absolved of our responsibilities. The onus is on us, collectively, to make up for the lost momentum and work much harder in the remaining 7 years to accelerate progress on that which we have promised to deliver. The commitment to action presented at the summit should therefore be the tailwind to regain lost ground and supercharge implementation. Excellencies, the SDG Summit was only the start of what is a full agenda during High-Level Week. It naturally interlinks with the General Assembly's high-level dialogue on financing for development, which is key to accelerating the financing impetus for the SDGs. The preparatory ministerial meeting for the Summit of the Future will help to launch the negotiations of the Pact of the Future, giving guidance on how to ensure that the United Nations is fit for purpose in the 21st century. It will give member states the opportunity to come together and to transform our shared future. We will also see 3 health-related high-level meetings on pandemic prevention, preparedness and response, universal health coverage, and on tuberculosis, all of which offer us opportunities to better the lives of our global citizens. And the Secretary General's Climate Action Summit offers a moment to build political ambition ahead of COP28 in November. Tomorrow, I will also join hands with several heads of state and government to convene a breakfast summit to address the existential threats posed by sea level rise, an issue of significant concern to small island developing states, especially those in the Pacific region. Excellencies, allow me to pause here and to reiterate my deepest condolences to the governments and people of Morocco and Libya. The twin disasters of earthquakes and flooding have left thousands dead and untold more suffering. It is my sincere hope that resources and relief can be expedited to support all those who now find themselves in desperate need. As a citizen of a climate vulnerable region, I urge member states to recognize the continued and escalating impacts of climate change and to deliver real transformative results. Let us work together to unlock the finances and resources required to support those most vulnerable in mitigation, adaptation, and resilience building. And let us continue to work on the multidimensional vulnerability index with the aim of moving beyond GDP to a measure of economic development that effectively captures a country's true vulnerability to external shocks. Excellencies, beyond the high-level week, this year we will commemorate the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This is an opportunity to rededicate ourselves to the principles enshrined in the Declaration and to remind ourselves that we are all born free and equal in dignity and in rights. As President of the 78th session, I am committed to championing vulnerable and marginalized groups, including indigenous peoples, peoples living with disabilities, and older persons. I have committed to ensure that we do not continue to neglect countries in special situations, and I intend to soon launch the high-level advisory group on LDCs, LLDCs, and SIDS. But first and foremost, we need to work for all women and girls who are appallingly still struggling for equality and respect. We must walk the talk on gender equality and women's empowerment. This means according women full, equal, and meaningful participation at every level. As an international gender champion myself, I'm strongly committed to promoting gender equality and women's empowerment. And I have appointed a special envoy and special advisor on gender equality and women's empowerment to assist me in this endeavor. Before I close, allow me to emphasize this. Despite the many and complex challenges we face, we do have the capacity to effect change, consequential change. We can make a meaningful difference to the lives of billions of people if we so choose. We do not lack capacity. What we lack is the will to act. By putting aside our differences and bridging divides, we can deliver, we must deliver peace, progress, prosperity, and sustainability to everyone, everywhere. So let us step up and take action now. Let us re-energize the UN General Assembly and demonstrate our capacity and our will to deliver for all. In the words of Stephen Pressfield, an author born in Trinidad and Tobago, the most pernicious aspect of procrastination is that it can become a habit. We don't just put off our lives today, we put them off till our deathbed. Never forget, this very moment, we can change our lives. There never was a moment, and never will be, when we are without the power to alter our destiny. This second, we can turn the tables on resistance. This second, we can sit down and do our work. Excellencies, I thank you once again for your support to me and my presidency, and I wish you fruitful, productive, and healthy debate in the coming days. I thank you. Thank you. Before giving the floor to the first speaker for this morning, I would like to remind members that the list of speakers for the general debate has been established on the agreed basis that statements should be no longer than 15 minutes to enable all speakers to be heard at a given meeting. Within this time frame, I would like to appeal to speakers to deliver their statements at a reasonable pace so that interpretation into the other official UN languages may be provided properly. I would also like to draw your attention to the decision taken by the General Assembly at previous sessions, namely that the practice of expressing congratulations inside the General Assembly Hall after a speech has been delivered is strongly discouraged. After delivering their statements from the rostrum, speakers are invited to exit the General Assembly Hall through room GA 200, located behind the rostrum, before returning to their seats. May I take it that the General Assembly agrees to proceed in this manner? It is so decided. Finally, I should like to draw the attention of members that during the general debate, official photographs of all the speakers are taken by the Department of Global Communications. Members interested in obtaining these photographs are requested to contact the Photo Library of the United Nations. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Luis Inácio Lula de Silva, President of the Federative Republic of Brazil. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome His Excellency Luis Inácio Lula de Silva, President of the Federative Republic of Brazil, and to invite him to address the Assembly.
My greetings to the President of the General Assembly, Ambassador Dennis Francis from Trinidad, Tobago. It's a great pleasure to be preceded by the United Nations Secretary General António Guterres. I greet each of the heads of state and government and delegates present. I pay homage to our compatriot Sergio Vieira de Mello and 21 other employees of this organization, victims of the brutal attack in Baghdad 20 years ago. I also wish to express my condolences to the victims of the earthquake in Morocco and the storms that hit Libya. Like what happened recently in the state of Rio Grande do Sul in my country, these tragedies have claimed lives and causing irreparable losses. Our thoughts and prayers are with all the victims and their families. Ladies and gentlemen, exactly 20 years ago, I stood on this rostrum for the first time and said, on that September 23rd, 2003, my first words before this World Parliament be of confidence in the human capacity to overcome challenges and evolve towards superior forms of coexistence. I return today to say that I maintain my unshakable trust in humanity. At that time, the world had not yet realized the severity of the climate crisis. Today, it knocks on our doors, destroys our homes, our cities, our countries, kills and imposes losses and suffering on our brothers, especially the poorest. Hunger, the central theme of my speech at this World Parliament 20 years ago, today affects 735 million human beings who will go to sleep tonight without knowing if they'll have anything to eat tomorrow. The world is increasingly unequal. The 10 richest billionaires have more wealth than the poorest 40% of humanity. The destiny of every child born on this planet seems to be decided while they're still in their mother's womb. The part of the world where their parents live and the social class their family belongs to will determine whether or not that child will have opportunities throughout life. Whether they will eat at every meal or whether they will be denied the right to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day. Whether they will have access to health care or whether they will fall to diseases that could have already been eradicated. Whether they will finish school and get a quality job or whether they will become part of the countless of unemployed, underemployed, and discouraged people. First of all, we must overcome resignation, which makes us accept such unfairness as a natural phenomenon. To overcome inequality, there's a lack of political will from those who govern the world in order to overcome inequality. Ladies and gentlemen, if today I return in the honorable capacity of President of Brazil, it is thanks to the victory won by democracy in my country. Democracy ensured that we overcame hate, misinformation, and oppression. Hope, once again, has won over fear. Our mission is to unite Brazil and rebuild a sovereign, fair, sustainable, supportive, with solidarity, generous, and a joyful country. Brazil is finding itself again with itself, with our region, with the world, and multilateralism. As I never tire of repeating, Brazil is back. Our country is back to make its due contributions in facing the major global Our country is back to make its due contribution in facing the major global challenges. We have reclaimed our foreign policy's universalism, marked by respectful dialogue with everyone. The international community is immersed in a whirlwind of multiple and simultaneous crises. The COVID-19 pandemic, the climate crisis, the food and energy insecurity have been amplified by growing geopolitical tensions. Racism, intolerance, xenophobia have spread, encouraged by new technologies created supposedly to bring us closer together. If we had to summarize these challenges in a single word, this challenge could be called, the reason for its challenge would be inequality. Inequality is at the root of this phenomena or acts to aggravate them. The UN's broadest and most ambitious collective action aimed at development, the 2030 Agenda, could turn into its biggest failure. We have reached half of the implementation period and are still far from the defined goals. Most of the Sustainable Development Goals are moving at a slow pace. The moral and political imperative of eradicating poverty and ending hunger appears to have been numbed. In the 7 years that we have left, reducing inequalities within and between countries should become the core objective of the 2030 Agenda. Reducing inequalities within countries requires including the poor in government budgets and making the rich pay taxes that are proportional to their wealth. In Brazil, we are committed to implementing all the 17 SDGs in an integrated and indivisible manner. We want to achieve racial equality in Brazilian society through an 18th goal, which we will voluntarily adopt. We launched the Brazil Zero Hunger Plan, which will bring together a series of initiatives to reduce poverty and food insecurity. Amongst them is the Bolsa Familia, the family stipend, which has become a global reference in income transfer programs for families that keep their children vaccinated and in school. Inspired by Brazilian Bertha Lutz, a pioneer as an advocate in gender equality in the UN Charter, we have passed a bill that makes equal pay between women and men mandatory when they perform the same role. We shall fight femicide and all forms of violence against women. We shall rigorously advocate for the rights of the LGBTQI plus groups and of people with disabilities. We have revived social participatory practices as a strategic tool for implementing public policies. Mr. President, acting against climate change involves thinking about tomorrow and facing historical inequalities. Rich countries grew based on a model with high rates of climate damaging gas emissions. The climate emergency makes it urgent to correct course and implement what has already been agreed. There's no other reason why we speak of common but differentiated responsibilities. It is the vulnerable populations in the global south who are most affected by the loss and damage caused by climate change. The richest 10% of the world's population are responsible for almost half of all carbon released into the atmosphere. We, developing countries, do not want to repeat this model. In Brazil, we have already proven once and will prove again that a socially fair and environmentally sustainable model is possible. We are at the forefront of energy transition, and our matrix is already one of the cleanest in the world. 87% of our electrical power comes from clean and renewable sources. Solar, wind, biomass, ethanol, and biodiesel power generation is growing every year. The potential for generating green hydrogen is immense. With the ecological transformation plan, we will invest in sustainable industrialization and sustainable infrastructure. We have resumed a sound and renewed Amazon agenda with oversight actions aimed at fighting environmental crimes. Over the last 8 months, deforestation in the Brazilian Amazon has already been reduced by 48%. The whole world has always talked about the Amazon. The whole world has always talked about the Amazon. Now, the Amazon is speaking for itself. A month ago, we hosted the Belém Summit meeting at the heart of the Amazon and launched a new collaboration agenda between countries that are part of that biome. There are 50 million South Americans living in the Amazon whose future depends on the decisive and coordination action of the countries that hold sovereignty over the region's territories. We all have also further dialogue with other countries that have tropical forests in Africa and Asia. We want to arrive at COP28 in Dubai with a joint vision that reflects, without any coaching, the priorities for preserving the Amazon, the Congo, and Borneo Mekong basins based on our needs. Without mobilizing financial and technological resources, there's no way to implement what we decided in the Paris Agreement and the Global Biodiversity Framework. The promise to allocate $100 billion annually to developing countries remains just that, a long promise. Today, this amount would be insufficient for a demand that already reaches trillions of dollars. Mr. President, the principle on which multilateralism is based, that of sovereign equality between nations, has been eroding. At the main global governance levels, negotiations in which all countries have a voice and vote have lost momentum. When institutions reproduce inequalities, they are part of the problem, not the solution. Last year, the IMF made available $160 billion in special drawing rights to European countries and just $34 billion to African countries. The unequal and distorted representation of the management of the IMF and the World Bank is unacceptable. We have not corrected the excesses of market deregulation and the support of the ideology of the minimum state. The foundations of a new economic governance have not been laid. The BRICS was the result of this paralysis and constitute a strategic platform to promote cooperation between emerging countries. The recent expansion of the group at the Johannesburg Summit meeting strengthens the fight for an order which accommodates the economic, geographic, and political plurality of the 21st century. We are a force that works towards fairer global trade in the context of a serious crisis in multilateralism. Rich countries' protectionism has gained strength, and the World Trade Organization remains paralyzed, especially its dispute settlement system. Nobody remembers the Doha Development Round anymore. In the meantime, unemployment and precarious work has been undermining people's confidence in better times, especially the youth. Governments need to break away from the increasing dissonance between the voice of the markets and the voice of the streets. Neoliberalism has aggravated the economic and political inequality that plagues democracies today. Its legacy is a mass of disenfranchised and excluded people. Amidst the wreck, far-right adventures emerge who deny politics and sell solutions that are easy as they are wrong. Many have fallen to the temptation of replacing failed neoliberalism with primitive, conservative, and authoritarian nationalism. We repudiate an agenda that uses immigrants as scapegoats, undermines the welfare state, and attacks workers' rights. We need to reclaim the best humanist traditions which inspired the creation of the UN. No relevant economical, social, active inclusion policies at cultural, education, and digital levels are fundamental for promoting democratic values and defending the rule of law. Preserving press freedom is essential. A journalist like Julian Assange cannot be punished informing society in a transparent and legitimate way. Our fight is against misinformation and cybercrimes. Apps and platforms should not abolish the labor laws we fought so hard for. Upon taking over as the chair of the G20 next December, we will spare no effort to place the fight against inequality in all its dimensions at the core of the international agenda. Under the motto, building a just world and a sustainable planet, the Brazilian chair will coordinate social inclusion and fight against hunger, sustainable development, and reform of global governance institutions. Mr. President, there will be no sustainability or prosperity without peace. Armed conflicts are an offense to human rationality. We know the horrors and suffering produced by all wars. Promoting a culture of peace is a duty for all of us. Building it requires persistence and vigilance. It is disturbing to see that old unresolved disputes persist and new threats emerge or gain force. The difficulty of guaranteeing the creation of a state for the Palestinian people clearly shows this. Added to this case, the persevering humanitarian crisis in Haiti, the conflict in Yemen, threats to Libyan national unity, and institutional ruptures in Burkina Faso, Gabon, Guinea, Conakry, Mali, Niger, and Sudan. In Guatemala, there's a risk of a coup d'etat, which would prevent the winner of the democratic elections from taking office. The war in Ukraine exposes our collective inability to enforce the purposes and principles of the UN Charter. We do not underestimate the difficulties in achieving peace, but no solution will be lasting if it is not based on dialogue. I have reiterated that work needs to be done to create space for negotiations. A lot is invested in weapons and very little in development. Last year, military spending totaled over $2 trillion. Expenditures on nuclear weapons reached $83 billion, a value 20 times higher than the regular UN budget. Stability and security will not be achieved where there is social exclusion and inequality. The UN was born to be the home of understanding and dialogue. The international community must choose. On one hand, there is the expansion of conflicts, the furthering of inequalities, and the erosion of the rule of law. On the other, the renewing of multilateral institutions dedicated to promoting peace. Unilateral sanctions cause great harm to the population of affected countries. In addition to not achieving their alleged goals, they hinder the mediation and prevention processes and the peaceful resolution of conflicts. Brazil will continue to reject measures taken without support from the UN Charter, such as the economic and financial embargo imposed on Cuba and the attempt to classify this country as a state sponsor of terrorism. We shall continue to criticize any attempts to divide the world into zones of influence and reviving the Cold War. The UN Security Council has been progressively losing its credibility. This frailty is the specific result of actions from its permanent members who wage unauthorized wars aimed at territorial expansion or regime change. Its paralysis is the most eloquent proof of the urgent need to reform it, which will bring it greater representation and efficacy. Ladies and gentlemen, inequalities needs to inspire outrage over hunger, poverty, war, disrespect for human beings. Moved by the power of outrage, we may act willingly and unwavering in fighting inequality and effectively transforming the world around us. The UN needs to fulfill its role as a builder of a world with more solidarity, fraternity, and fairness. But it would only do so if its members have the courage to proclaim their discontent at inequality and work tirelessly to overcome it. And I will wish to say thank you very much to all of you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Federative Republic of Brazil for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. Yes? Yeah. The Assembly will hear an address from His Excellency Joseph R. Biden, Jr., President of the United States. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome His Excellency Joseph R. Biden, Jr., President of the United States of America, and I invite him to address the Assembly.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, my fellow leaders, about a week ago, I stood on the other side of the world in Vietnam, on soil once bloody with war. And I met a small group of veterans, Americans and Vietnamese, who witnessed, and I watched the exchange of personal artifacts from that war, identification cards and a diary. It was deeply moving to see the reaction of the Vietnamese and American soldiers. Culmination of 50 years of hard work on both sides to address the painful legacies of war and to choose to work together toward peace and a better future. Nothing about that journey was inevitable. For decades, it would have been unthinkable for an American president to stand in Hanoi alongside a Vietnamese leader and announce a mutual commitment to the highest level of country's partnership. But it's a powerful reminder that our history need not dictate our future. With the concerted leadership and careful effort, adversaries can become partners. Overwhelming challenges can be resolved, and deep wounds can heal. So let us never forget that. When we choose to stand together and recognize the common hopes that bind all humanity, we hold our hands the power to bend that arc of history. My fellow leaders, we gather once more at an inflection point in world history, with the eyes of the world upon all of you, all of us. As President of the United States, I understand the duty my country has to lead in this critical moment, to work with countries in every region, linking them in common cause, to join together with partners who share a common vision of the future of the world, where our children do not go hungry and everyone has access to quality health care, where workers are empowered and our environment is protected, where entrepreneurs and innovators everywhere can access opportunity everywhere, where conflicts are resolved peacefully and countries can chart their own course. The United States seeks a more secure, more prosperous, more equitable world for all people, because we know our future is bound to yours. Let me repeat that again. We know our future is bound to yours. And no nation can meet the challenges of today alone. The generations that preceded us organized this body, the United Nations, and built international financial institutions and multilateral and regional bodies to help take on the challenges of their time. It wasn't always perfect. But working together, the world made some remarkable and undeniable progress that improved the lives of all people. We avoided renewal of global conflict while lifting more than 1 billion people out of extreme poverty. We together expanded access to education for millions of children. We saved tens of millions of lives that would have otherwise been lost to preventable and treatable diseases like measles, malaria, tuberculosis. HIV/AIDS infections and deaths plummeted, in no small part because of PEPFAR's work in more than 55 countries, saving more than 25 million lives. It's a profound testament to what we can achieve when we act together, when we take on tough challenges, and an admonition for all of us to urgently accelerate our progress so that no one's left behind, because too many people are being left behind. The institutions we built together at the end of the Second World War are an enduring bedrock of our progress, and the United States is committed to sustaining them. And this year, we're proud to rejoin UNESCO. We also recognize that to meet the new challenges of our decades-old institutions and approaches, they must be updated to keep peace with the world. We have to bring in more leadership and capability that exists everywhere, especially from regions that had not always been fully included. We have to grapple with the challenges that are more connected and more complex. And we have to make sure we're delivering for people everywhere, not just somewhere, everywhere. Simply put, the 21st century results are badly needed. They're needed to move us along. That starts with the United Nations, starts right here in this room. In my address to this body last year, I announced the United States will support expanding the Security Council, increasing the number of permanent and non-permanent members. The United States has undertaken serious consultation with many member states. We'll continue to do our part to push more reform efforts forward, look for points of common ground, and make progress in the year ahead. We need to be able to break the gridlock that too often stymies progress and blocks consensus on the Council. We need more voices, more perspectives at the table. The United Nations must continue to preserve peace, prevent conflict, and alleviate human suffering. And we embrace nations stepping up to lead in new ways and to seek new breakthroughs on hard issues. For example, on Haiti, the Caribbean community is facilitating a dialogue among Haitian society. I thank President Ruto of Kenya. I thank him for his willingness to serve as the lead nation of a UN-backed security support mission. I call on the Security Council to authorize this mission now. The people of Haiti cannot wait much longer. The United States is working across the board to make global institutions more responsive, more effective, and more inclusive. For example, we've taken significant steps to reform and scale up the World Bank, expanding its financing to low and middle-income countries so it can help boost progress toward meeting the Sustainable Development Goals and better address interconnected challenges like climate change and fragility. Under the new president of the World Bank, change is already taking root. Last month, I asked the United States Congress for additional funds to expand World Bank financing by $25 billion. And at the G20, we rallied the major economies of the world to mobilize even more funding. Collectively, we can deliver a transformational boost to World Bank lending. And because the multilateral development banks are among the best tools we have for mobilizing transparent, high-quality investment in developing countries, reforming these institutions can be a game changer. Similarly, we proposed making sure developing countries have a strong voice and representation at the International Monetary Fund. We're going to continue our efforts to reform the World Trade Organization, preserve competition, openness, transparency, and the rule of law, while at the same time equipping it to better tackle modern-day imperatives like driving the clean energy transition, protecting workers, promoting inclusive and sustainable growth. And this month, we strengthened the G20 as a vital forum, welcoming the African Union as a permanent member. By upgrading and strengthening our institutions, that's only half of the picture. We must also forge new partnerships, confront new challenges. Emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence hold both enormous potential and enormous peril. We need to be sure they are used as tools of opportunity, not as weapons of oppression. Together with leaders around the world, the United States is working to strengthen rules and policies so AI technologies are safe before they're released to the public. To make sure we govern this technology, not the other way around, having it govern us. And I'm committed to working through this institution and other international bodies and directly with leaders around the world, including our competitors, to ensure we harness the power of artificial intelligence for good while protecting our citizens from its most profound risk. It's going to take all of us. I've been working on this for a while, as many of you have. It's going to take all of us to get this right. In every region of the world, the United States is mobilizing strong alliances, versatile partnerships, common purpose, collective action to bring new approaches to our shared challenges. Here in the Western Hemisphere, we united 21 nations in support of the Los Angeles Declaration on Migration and Protection, launching a region-wide approach to a region-wide challenge to better uphold laws and protect the rights of migrants. In the Indo-Pacific, we've elevated our Quad partnership with India, Japan, and Australia to deliver concrete progress for the people of the region on everything from vaccines to maritime security. Just yesterday, after 2 consultations and diplomacy, the United States brought together dozens of nations across 4 continents to establish a new partnership for Atlantic cooperation so that the coastal Atlantic countries can better cooperate on science, technology, environmental protection, and sustainable economic development. We brought together nearly 100 countries in a global coalition to counter fentanyl and synthetic drugs to reduce the human cost of this affliction, and it is real. And as the nature of the terrorist threats evolve and the geography expands to new places, we're working with our partners to bring capabilities to bear to disrupt plotting, degrade networks, and protect all of our people. Additionally, we convene the Summit for Democracy to strengthen democratic institutions, root out corruption, and reject political violence. And in this moment where democratically elected governments have been toppled in quick succession in West and Central Africa, we're reminded that this work is as urgent and important as ever. We stand with the African Union and ECOWAS and other regional bodies to support constitutional rule. We will not retreat from the values that make us strong. We will defend democracy, our best tool to meet the challenges we face around the world. And we're working to show how democracy can deliver in ways that matter to people's lives. The Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment addresses the enormous need and opportunity for infrastructure investment in low and middle income countries, particularly in Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia. Through strategic, targeted public investments, we can unlock enormous amounts of private sector financing. The G7 has pledged to work with parties to collectively mobilize $600 billion in infrastructure financing by 2027. The United States has already mobilized more than $30 billion to date. We're creating a race to the top with projects that have high standards for workers, the environment, and intellectual property while avoiding the trap of unsustainable debt. We're focusing on economic corridors that will maximize the impact of our collective investment and deliver consequential results across multiple countries and multiple sectors. For example, the Libido Corridor will extend across Africa from the western port of Angola to the DRC to Zambia, boosting regional connectivity and strengthening commerce and food security in Africa. Similarly, the groundbreaking effort we announced at the G20 to connect India to Europe through the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Israel will spur opportunities and investment across 2 continents. This is part of our effort to build a more sustainable, integrated Middle East. It demonstrates how Israel's greater normalization and economic connection with his neighbors, is delivering positive and practical impacts, even as we continue to work tirelessly to support a just and lasting peace between the Israelis and Palestinians, 2 states for 2 people. Now, let me be clear. None of these partnerships are about containing any country. They're about a positive vision for our shared future. When it comes to China, I want to be clear and consistent. We seek to responsibly manage the competition between our countries so it does not tip into conflict. I've said we are for de-risking, not decoupling with China. We will push back on aggression and intimidation and defend the rules of the road, from freedom of navigation to overflight to level economic playing field that have helped safeguard security and prosperity for decades. But we also stand ready to work together with China on issues where progress hinges on our common efforts. Nowhere is that more critical than accelerating the climate crisis, than the accelerating climate crisis. We see it everywhere. Record-breaking heat waves in the United States and China, wildfires ravaging North America and Southern Europe, a 5th year of drought in the Horn of Africa, tragic flooding in Libya. My heart goes out to the people of Libya. That's killed thousands of people. Together, these snapshots tell an urgent story of what awaits us if we fail to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels and begin to climate-proof the world. For one day, my administration, the United States, has treated this crisis as an existential threat from the moment we took office, not only for us, but for all of humanity. Last year, I signed into law in the United States the largest investment ever anywhere in the history of the world to combat the climate crisis and help move the global economy toward a clean energy future. We're also working with the Congress to quadruple our climate financing to help developing countries reach their climate goals and adapt to climate impacts. And this year, the world's on track to meet the climate finance pledge that made under the Paris Agreement, $100 billion to raise collectively. But we need more investment from public and private sector alike, especially in places that have contributed so little to global emissions, but face some of the worst effects of climate change, like the Pacific Islands. The United States is working directly with the Pacific Island Forum to help these nations adapt, build resilience to the climate impact, even as we lead the effort to build innovative new partnerships that attack the global challenges from all sides. From the First Movers Coalition, which is mobilizing billions of private sector community and the private sector commitments, to creating a market demand for green products in carbon-intense sectors like concrete, shipping, aviation, and trucking, to the Agricultural Innovation Mission for Climate, which is bringing farmers into the climate solution and making our food supply more resilient to climate shocks, and the Global Methane Pledge, now endorsed by more than 150 countries, which expands our focus beyond our carbon emission targets to reduce the potential greenhouse gases in our atmosphere by 30% in this decade. It's all within our capacity. We need to bring the same commitment and urgency and ambition as we work together to meet the Sustainable Development Goals of 2030. These goals were adopted at the United Nations in 2015 as a roadmap for improving lives around the world. But the hard truth is, for decades of progress, the world has lost ground these past years in the wake of COVID-19, conflicts, and other crises. The United States is committing to doing its part to get us back on track. All told, in the first 2 years of my administration, the United States has invested more than $100 billion to drive development progress in bolstering food security, expanding access to education worldwide, strengthening healthcare systems, and fighting disease. And we've helped mobilize billions more in the private sector investments. But to accelerate our forward progress, on the Sustainable Development Goals, we all have to do more. We need to build new partnerships that change the way we tackle this challenge, to unlock trillions of additional financing for development, drawing on all sources. We need to fill the gaps and address the failures of our existing system exposed by the pandemic. We need to ensure that women and girls benefit fully from our progress. We must also do more to grapple with the debt that holds back so many low and middle-income countries. When nations are forced to service unsustainable debt payments over the needs of their own people, it makes it harder for them to invest in their own futures. And as we work together to recover from global shocks, the United States will also continue to be the largest single country donor of humanitarian assistance at this moment of unparalleled need in the world. Folks, cooperation, partnership. These are the keys to progress on the challenges that affect us all, and the baseline for responsible global leadership. We don't need to agree on everything to keep moving forward on issues like arms control, a cornerstone of international security. After more than 50 years of progress under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, Russia is shredding long-standing arms control agreements, including announcing the suspension of the New START and withdrawing from the Conventional Forces in Europe Treaty. I view it as irresponsible and makes the entire world less safe. The United States is going to continue to pursue good faith efforts to reduce the threat of weapons of mass destruction and lead by example, no matter what else is happening in the world. This year, we safely destroyed at least the last chemical munitions in the U.S. stockpile, fulfilling our commitment toward a world free of chemical weapons. And we condemn the DPRK's continued violation of UN Security Council resolutions, but we are committed to diplomacy that will bring about the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. We're working with our partners to address Iran's destabilizing activities that threaten regional and global security, and remain steadfast in our commitment that Iran must never acquire a nuclear weapon. Now, even as we evolve our institutions and drive creative new partnerships, let me be clear. Certain principles of our international system are sacrosanct. Sovereignty, territorial integrity, human rights. These are the core tenets of the UN Charter, the pillars for peaceful relations among nations, without which we cannot achieve any of our goals. That has not changed, and that must not change. Yet, for the second year in a row, this gathering, dedicated to peaceful resolution of conflicts, is darkened by the shadow of war. An illegal war of conquest brought without provocation by Russia against its neighbor Ukraine. Like every nation in the world, the United States wants this war to end. No nation wants this war to end more than Ukraine. And we strongly support Ukraine in its efforts to bring about a diplomatic resolution that delivers just and lasting peace. But Russia alone bears responsibility for this war. Russia alone has the power to end this war immediately. And it's Russia alone that stands in the way of peace, because Russia's price for peace is Ukraine's capitulation, Ukraine's territory, and Ukraine's children. Russia believes that the world will grow weary and allow it to brutalize Ukraine without consequence. But I ask you this: if we abandon the core principles of the United States to appease an aggressor, can any member state in this body feel confident that they are protected? If we allow Ukraine to be carved up, is the independence of any nation secure? I'd respectfully suggest the answer is no. We have to stand up to this naked aggression today and deter other would-be aggressors tomorrow. That's why the United States, together with our allies and partners around the world, will continue to stand with the brave people of Ukraine as they defend their sovereignty and territorial integrity and their freedom. It's not only an investment in Ukraine's future, but in the future of every country that seeks a world governed by basic rules that apply equally to all nations and uphold the rights of every nation, no matter how big or small. Sovereignty, territorial integrity, they are the fixed foundations of this noble body. And universal human rights is its North Star. We cannot sacrifice either. 75 years ago, Universal Declaration of Human Rights captured a remarkable act of collective hope. I say that again, collective hope. Drafted by a committee representing different regions, faiths, philosophies, and adopted by the entire General Assembly. The rights contained in the Declaration are elemental and enduring. And while we still struggle to uphold equal and inalienable rights of all, they remain ever steady and ever true. We cannot turn away from abuses, whether in Xinjiang, Tehran, Darfur, or anywhere else. We have to continue working to ensure that women and girls enjoy equal rights and equal participation in their societies, that indigenous groups, racial, ethnic, religious minorities, people with disabilities do not have their potential stifled by systemic discrimination, that the LGBTQI people are not prosecuted or targeted with violence because of who they are. These rights are part of our shared humanity. They're absent. When they're absent anywhere, their loss is felt everywhere. They are essential to the advancement of human progress that brings us together. My fellow leaders, let me close with this. At this inflection point in history, we're going to be judged by whether or not we live up to the promises we made to ourselves, to each other, to the most vulnerable, and to all those who will inherit the world we create, because that's what we're doing. Will we find within ourselves the courage to do what must be done, to preserve the planet, to protect human dignity, to provide opportunity for people everywhere, and to defend the tenets of the United Nations? There can only be one answer to that question. We must, and we will. The road ahead is long and difficult, but if we persevere and prevail, if we keep the faith in ourselves and show what's possible, let's do this work together. Let's deliver progress for everyone. Let's bend the arc of history for the good of the world, because it's in our power to do it. Thank you for listening. You're kind.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the United States of America for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. May I request representatives to remain seated while we suspend the meeting for 5 minutes before resuming to hear the next speaker. Yeah. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the meeting is resumed. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Gustavo Petro Urrego, President of the Republic of Colombia. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome His Excellency Gustavo Petro Urrego, President of the Republic of Colombia, and invite him to address the Assembly. Extraordinary. Sorry, sir. I have to repair the gavel. This is extraordinary. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, can I ask that the Assembly come to order to receive the statement of His Excellency Gustavo Petro Urrego, President of the Republic of Colombia. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you, Antonio, Dennis, my wife Veronica, and my youngest daughter Veronica here. I, a week ago, was in Santiago de Chile, and I've made my journey to here from there to commemorate the 50th anniversary of a homicidal and bloody coup against President Salvador Allende. I then went through my own country and a popular neighborhood of Medellin, where the mafia used to attract young people to offer them the possibility of learning computer programming. I then arrived in Havana, an unjustly blockaded country, where a president of my country suggested and achieved that it be included in the list of terrorist-sponsoring countries simply because it helped to make peace in Colombia. And now I am here, ladies and gentlemen, to make my speech to you. Over this year, since the last speech that I gave in the United Nations, we have only seen a deepening of what the wealthy meeting in Davos call a polycrisis. The war is continuing. Hunger continues. The recession is increasing, and the climate crisis has shown its teeth as never before, claiming thousands of lives and heating our lands and our seas like never before. This has been a year where humanity has been losing and has unfailingly hastened the era of extinction. All of these crises are, in fact, just one crisis, the crisis of life. It seems that world leaders have become the enemies of life. The crisis of life is being expressed in one devastating indicator. This began at the furthest corners of the earth, far away from the remotest regions, a silent march of people from different cultures who are intermingling on their way, like an infinitely nuanced painting. The colors are mixing together in an uncontainable march. A multitude of all the colors is moving along the tracks, through the seas, through the jungles. It is making up a kind of work of art on the canvas of the earth. A flow of tones, sounds, different clothes and cultures in an amalgam which does not forget its beginnings. In an amalgam in a great march from the south to the north. This is the exodus of humanity which has begun. Today, there are tens of millions. Tomorrow, according to experts, by 2070, the figure will have reached 3 billion, fleeing from their beloved homes because these homes will be uninhabitable. In my homeland, the country of beauty, Colombia, the country of an explosion of life, by 2070, only deserts will remain. The people will go to the north, no longer attracted by the mirage of wealth, but rather by something simpler, something more vital, water. Since the beginnings, the millenary beginnings of humanity, people have gone to where water is, to the north. Billions of people will defy armies and will change the earth to do this. This exodus of the peoples to the north is an exact reflection of the dimension of the failure of governments. This last year has been a time of defeat for governments, of defeat for humanity. The exodus across the borders has increased. They have set the dogs and the hounds on the immigrants. They have put people on horses to pursue them, with whips in their hands, with stocks and chains. They have built prisons. So much the hatred has grown of the foreign, of the strange. These prisons have even been built at sea, so that these women and men cannot tread the earth of the white people who still believe themselves to be the superior race and are nostalgic for this. And through their choices and elections, they revive the leader who said so and who killed millions as a result. The exodus has increased over this year, showing how much the crisis of life is advancing. But the minutes are ticking on in defining life or death on our planet. And rather than halting this march of time and talking about how to defend life for the future, thanks to greater knowledge and expanding life to the universe, we are deciding instead to waste our time killing one another. We are not thinking about how to expand life to the stars, but rather how to end life on our own planet. We have devoted ourselves to war. We have been called to war. Latin America has been called upon to produce war machines, men to go to the killing fields. They're forgetting that our countries have been invaded several times by the very same people who are now talking about combating invasions. They're forgetting that for oil, Iraq was invaded, Syria and Libya. They're forgetting that the same reasons they use to defend Zelensky are those very reasons which should be deployed to defend Palestine. They forget that to meet the Sustainable Development Goals, all wars must be brought to an end. But they are helping to wage one war in particular, because world powers see this suiting themselves in their gamesmanship, in their games of hunger, and they're forgetting to bring an end to the other war, because for these powers, this did not suit them. What is the difference between Ukraine and Palestine, I ask? Is it not time to bring an end to both wars and other wars too, and make the most of the short time we have to build paths to save life on the planet? As president of Colombia, of beauty, of a group of humanity, millions of workers, women and men from people from the fields, workers, young people of all colours. I'm the president these people decided to elect in the majority, and I'm here to speak before you. And I propose bringing an end to this war so that we have time to save ourselves. I propose that the United Nations should hold, as soon as possible, 2 peace conferences, one on Ukraine, the other on Palestine. Not because there are no other wars in the world, as there are in my country, but because this would guide the way to making peace in all regions of the planet. Because both of these alone can bring an end to the hypocrisy as a political practice. Because we could be sincere, a virtue without which we cannot be warriors for life itself. The generation which today must decide and must act as soon as possible to overcome the enormous hurricane which has been unleashed against life from the dark but powerful forces of greed, the hurricane of capital, which only looks to profit and which has swallowed up the planet and the very foundation of our existence. I propose bringing an end to war, to defend life from the climate crisis, which is the mother of all crises. This summit has been established to evaluate the targets of the Sustainable Development Goals established by the governments for 2030. It's easy to carry out an assessment. These human development goals will not be achieved. We are far from reaching them. We have moved backwards. The United Nations Human Development Objectives would more simply be called social and environmental justice. Social justice will not be achieved for humanity by 2030 because what we have sown is injustice in our planet. What has been created over these years is injustice. The injustice of putting the vaccine against the deadly virus on the market, concentrating it in rich countries. Latin America saw 30% of COVID deaths, although it makes up only 8% of the world population. Who said that health should be a business and not a right? Millions of older people and others died because the vaccine was traded rather than being the common good of humanity. They failed to deliver on their own promise to finance adaptation to climate change. They do not have $100 billion to give to countries to defend themselves from floods, storms, and hurricanes. But they do have that money in a single day to allow Russians and Ukrainians to kill one another. Now we no longer need $100 billion. We need $3 trillion to overcome the climate crisis. And the clock is ticking. Ladies and gentlemen, injustice has been sown. And cannabis growers and coca growers have been arrested rather than tackling the solitude in which the youth of their own countries live. These countries are the greatest economic and military power in the history of humanity. To combat this solitude, they have moved on to the drugs of death, to fentanyl. They wanted a war against the drugs of the rebellious youth who opposed the war in Vietnam, the marijuana and the LSD of the hippies. And they ended up driving their society towards the drug of neoliberalism and competition, the drug of the Manhattan yuppie, cocaine. And they imprisoned millions of Africans and Latin Americans in cold, private prisons. And 1 million Latin Americans were killed. Democracies were destroyed in our America. But they never arrested the Manhattan yuppie. And now they are facing the grand outcome of the prohibition of drugs, fentanyl, which is not killing 4,000, but 100,000 young people every year in the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, they sowed injustice. And the worst of these has been to condemn humanity to war. So today, the balance of social justice across the world is so skewed. The problem is that this was not an issue of socialists, of progressives. Rather, it was a matter where the time left to the planet was flowing away. As president of the country of beauty, I propose returning to a time of simplicity to recover the time lost. So ending the war and reforming the global financial system. From the conferences, the peace conferences on Ukraine and Palestine, we should come out able to build a reform that we have already discussed in the Amazon forest, where the greatest river of the earth, which has crossed the greatest jungle of the earth, reaches the sea. We had discussed this in Brasilia, and we went to Kenya to meet with the brotherly peoples of Africa, where we came from at the time of one of the other great injustices of power, slavery. And we went to Paris to see whether multitudes there were still crying for liberty, equality, and fraternity. And we went to Washington to talk to the president and see whether we in the North and the South of the Americas could meet again, as we did in the past, over 2 centuries ago, where we met in history to talk about liberty, equality, democracy, and republic. And let us talk in all possible ways about getting to the root of the climate crisis and its solution. If fossil capitalism has no financing, it will die. Its death throes will be hard, but this is necessary for there to be humanity, nature, and life. The decarbonized capitalism will have to be financed, but we know that green capital will only flow to places where there is profit. That is what governs it. And its structure is a very narrow one to contain the decarbonization of the entire world. Governments and powers who still believe that the climate crisis and that of life can be overcome with cheap loans are mistaken. They are deluded to propose that those countries of the earth which are already indebted are indebted as a result of disease and greed, and that they can use more loans to overcome a problem that only the belching chimneys of the north have produced. It is not possible to overcome the crisis of life, this mega crisis, with more indebtedness. The financing of life, the flow of medicines, which must be pumped into the veins of the economies and societies of the world to meet the challenge of leaving behind coal and oil under the earth, leaving it under the earth in those very places where the true veins of the earth flow, as Roberto Cobarilla, the Ua indigenous native from Colombia, said over 30 years ago. As he said, extracting oil was to remove the blood from the earth, and life would then die. The majority of the investment to decarbonize the world's economy should come from public funds, the efforts of societies, bringing together states so as to bring together humanity. Today they call this multilateralism. Governing the earth with the vision of democracy and not a vision of empire. Empires do not save life. They merely unleash wars. If the mega crisis of life is to be resolved, it will be through a democracy which achieves a global scale, a deeper democracy, which will not fear interlinking states and societies and planning for the great Marshall Plan of the revitalization of the planet. The market will help us somewhat, but we cannot ask for solutions from a mechanism which has no humanity. And when it was this mechanism which produced the very problem. Private funds can be used, but they will be limited by their own logic. The force to do this will come from public funds, and these funds are currently weakened by debt. The great battle of our generation is defending life for our children and grandchildren, and this can only be fully financed by what is public, by what belongs to all of us. We must liberate the public to save life. Many people may not like this, but if the voice of the public, of the state, of humanity, of multilateralism is to be heard again, this means the voice of change will be heard again. Because in order to save life, this is fundamental. Saving life requires an epoch of change, and it is urgent. Change and life are now synonymous. Youth of all colors today, in order to live, must fly the flags of change, of transformation, of a new humanity. It is democracy and not authoritarian regimes which is looking more and more like the Nazis. It is global democracy. These plans, the power of those states who are not tackling war, but are tackling and attacking the plans for life. These plans to achieve the transition to a decarbonized economy and to finance it. The decarbonized economy will, without a doubt, be a more humane and a more just economy. So, I, as President of the Country of Beauty, propose a reform of the global financial system, of the IMF, of the Multilateral Bank, and bringing an end to economic blockades and guiding funds from private capital. If everybody's debt is reduced, paying off the creditors with an IMF issuance of special drawing rights, there will be a decrease in the global public debt and a real increase in budgets and public funds. In this way, we will be able to finance the Marshall Plan for the Sustainable Development Goals, for the social and environmental justice of the planet, the plan to overcome, through mitigation and adaptation, the climate crisis, which is the crisis of life. This is reviving Keynes worldwide after forgetting him. This wise old man already said this, as did other wise people before him, and their words too are forgotten. The words that they expressed from their deep ideas. What a beautiful perspective in the midst of today's darkness and storms. A perspective which looks hopeful. The objective of life and justice can be achieved by treading the path of global democracy and of returning value to what is public, to what is common and shared, which can be reached by all. I want my grandchildren, who are babies today, Luna, Victoria, and Luca, and my daughter Antonella, to be able to live far from the apocalypse and the era of extinction. I want them to live in times where humanity was able to stop killing itself and killing the planet, and through the very diversity of its cultures, managed to achieve understanding and to achieve its mission, spreading the virus of life to the stars of the universe. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Colombia for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. The Assembly will hear an address by His Majesty King Abdullah II ibn al-Hussein II, King of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. I request protocol to escort His Majesty. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome His Majesty King Abdullah II ibn al-Hussein, King of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, and to invite him to address the Assembly.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Mr. President, Secretary General, Excellencies, when human catastrophes seem beyond description, we turn to the appalling statistics. This year around the world, more than 345 million people face food insecurity, daily hunger, or starvation. Among the most vulnerable are 108 million refugees, people who have been forcibly displaced from their homes and ways of life. And 40% of these refugees are children, the most defenseless of all. Yet these numbers cannot really convey the tragedy or the failure. Refugees are our brothers, our sisters. They look to our countries to help end the crises that have driven them from home. Refugees are mothers, fathers, grandparents who have made perilous journeys to save their families. They are young people with big dreams and little children who deserve the chance to dream big. They depend on the international community for their survival, and multiple UN agencies provide vital services to help meet the need. But in recent months, one by one, these agencies have been delivering difficult news. A severe shortfall in international funds has forced them to cut support. Is this what we've come to? Is the international community going to watch as refugee families find themselves forced to send their children to work instead of school? In Jordan, where refugees make up over 1/3 of our 11 million population, cuts have already thrown the lives of hundreds of thousands of refugees into uncertainty. The impact of such humanitarian shortfalls is never limited to a country or a region. Fear and want bring on sharp increases in the number of refugees fleeing to Europe and beyond, on journeys that too often end in tragedy. My friends, Jordanians are serious about our duty to those in need. We have done everything we can to secure a dignified life for refugees. Nearly half of the almost 1.4 million Syrians we host are under 18 years of age. For many of them, Jordan is the only place they have ever known. Over 230,000 Syrian children have been born in Jordan since 2011. We are sharing precious resources to help them meet basic needs: food, energy, and especially water. We are among the water-poorest countries in the world, even as our water supplies face extraordinary demand. And we face these pressures just when another crisis has hit our region: climate change, with its destructive heat waves, drought, and flooding. And to meet the refugee burden, we have been carefully managing to combine our limited resources with essential support from the international community. Because the responsibility to act falls on everybody's shoulders. Because the world cannot afford to walk away and leave a lost generation behind. But today, Jordan's capacity to deliver necessary services to refugees has surpassed our limits. Syrian refugees' future is in their country, not in host countries. But until they are able to return, we must all do right by them. And the fact is, refugees are far from returning. On the contrary, more Syrians are likely to leave their country as the crisis persists. And Jordan will not have the ability nor the resources to host and care for more. We must find a political solution consistent with UN Security Council Resolution 2254, the step-for-step approach that offers a path forward, proposed by Jordan as the basis for engagement with the Syrian government and coordinated with the UN. This approach sets a roadmap to incrementally resolve the crisis and deal with all its consequences. Until then, we will protect our country against any future threats the crisis could pose to our national security. My friends, Jordan's case is a microcosm of our entire region. For all our people's immense potential, repeated crises have held back the promise of greater development and prosperity. Our region is a focal point where some of the most urgent global challenges are converging. How will our world respond? Will we come together in global solidarity to get to the root of the problem, the conflicts and the crises that destroy life and hope? Will we work as one to rebuild the lost trust in international action and help those in want? My friends, our region will continue to suffer until the world helps lift the shadow of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, the central issue in the Middle East. No architecture for regional security and development can stand over the burning ashes of this conflict. But 7.5 decades on, it still smolders. Where are we going? Without clarity on where Palestinians' future lies, it will be impossible to converge on a political solution to this conflict. Five million Palestinians live under occupation. No civil rights, no freedoms of mobility, no say in their lives. Yet every UN resolution since the beginning of this conflict recognizes the equal rights of the Palestinian people to a future of peace, dignity, and hope. This is the heart of the two-state solution, the only path to a comprehensive, lasting peace. We can see the Israeli people actively defending and engaging in the expression of their national identity. Yet the Palestinian people are deprived of that same right to express and fulfill their own national identity. The basic requirement for that right is the establishment of their own independent and viable state on the June 4th, 1967 lines, with East Jerusalem as its capital, living alongside Israel in peace, security, and prosperity. And delaying justice and peace has brought endless cycles of violence. 2023 has been the deadliest for the Palestinian people in the past 15 years. How can people trust in global justice while settlement building, land confiscations, and home demolitions continue? Where is the global solidarity to make UN resolutions believable by people in need of our help? Jerusalem is a flashpoint for global concern. Under the Hashemite custodianship of Islamic and Christian holy sites, Jordan remains committed to safeguarding the city's identity. But preserving Jerusalem as the city of faith and peace for Islam, Christianity, and Judaism is a responsibility that we all share. and we must not abandon Palestinian refugees to the forces of despair. Sustainable funding is urgently needed by UNRWA, the UN agency that provides vital relief, education, and health services to millions of Palestinian refugees. And this is essential to protect families, keep communities stable, and prepare young people for productive lives. We must protect young Palestinians from extremists who prey on their frustrations and hopelessness by making sure they continue to learn at the schools under the blue flag of the United Nations, as the alternative will be the black flags of terror, hate, and extremism. My friends, we come together here as partners to deal with our challenges and shape a better future. We speak here for our people. We speak for families and the younger generation.